Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely massive. We're looking at the true scale of the Age of Discovery and those massive historical forces that completely reshaped our planet between 1400 and 1750. We're going to really dig into the overseas exploration, the rapid expansion, and of course, the conquests that allowed European nations to rise to an unprecedented level of world power. We'll see exactly how they shed their medieval institutions and laid the groundwork for modern global dominance.
Think about this for a second. For a solid 1,000 years during the medieval period, Europeans pretty much stayed put on their own continent. But then, almost suddenly, in the 1400s, two small European nations sparked a chain reaction that permanently altered the course of human history. So we have to ask, what exactly drove Spain and Portugal to brave the open ocean? And what on earth were they hoping to find out there?
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're starting with the Iberian expansion. Then we'll unpack those three famous motives: gold, God, and glory. After that, we'll step into the mind of the conquistador, see how they went about dividing the world, and wrap up by looking at the global impact. Section 1, the Iberian expansion. Let's look at how they pushed the boundaries of the known world. So, geographically speaking, Spain and Portugal share the Iberian Peninsula. It's uniquely positioned right there facing the rough Atlantic Ocean and North Africa. Now, back in the late Middle Ages, Venetian and Muslim merchants held an absolute monopoly on the Afro-Asian trade, and this trade was incredibly lucrative. We're talking spices, silk, gems. But every single time these goods changed hands on their journey into Europe, the prices absolutely skyrocketed. Portugal, and shortly after Spain, realized that if they wanted real wealth and power, they had to cut out the middlemen completely. They needed a direct sea route to Asia. But here's the thing, desire simply wasn't enough. They needed the tech to actually pull it off. Enter the caravel ship. This was a total game changer. By combining Arab and Chinese technologies, things like the compass and the astrolabe, with their own local inventions, they constructed ships that could do something totally unprecedented. They could sail against the wind on the open ocean. And crucially, these vessels were sturdy enough to hold heavy cannons. Having that naval artillery meant the Spanish and Portuguese could easily overpower merchant ships and conquer territories where the locals didn't have guns. It gave them an immediate, undisputed advantage at sea. Which brings us to Section 2. Gold, God, and glory, the core modus. Historians love a good shorthand, and here they use the rule of three: gold, God, and glory, to perfectly capture the deeply intertwined motivations of this European expansion. Let's break them down. First, gold. This wasn't just literal gold, it was material gain across the board: Asian spices, American metals, and the highly profitable trade of resources. Next, God. This represented a really intense, militant, crusading, and missionary tradition. Remember, they were fresh off the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule, so they felt a profound spiritual duty to spread Christianity into the New World. Finally, glory was all about competition. The monarchs were desperate to increase their state wealth and power, while the individual explorers, often poor noblemen called hidalgos, saw this as their one big shot at upward mobility. So you had these intense personal ambitions, perfectly aligning with the massive geopolitical goals of the Spanish and Portuguese crowns. To really get the why behind all of this, we have to understand the economic engine driving it. We're talking about mercantilism. These newly centralized monarchies figured out that true power meant hoarding wealth, specifically building up vast reserves of precious metals. The state and large private companies essentially teamed up to maximize exports and minimize imports. This wasn't just a handful of adventurous sailors deciding to explore. This was a highly systemic, state-sponsored pursuit of global dominance through capital. All right, moving to Section 3, we're going to zoom in on a wild historical paradox: the mind of the conquistador. The psychology here is fascinating because the conquistadors viewed themselves through an incredibly paradoxical lens. On one hand, they genuinely believed they were divine saviors. Hernán Cortés actually wrote about tearing down indigenous idols and purifying temples to save souls. But on the other hand, they were operating as ruthless crusaders obsessed with violent conquest and getting rich. Take the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, for example. During a sacred festival, Spanish forces launched a totally unprovoked surprise attack on unarmed dancers and musicians, slaughtering them in a patio for 3 solid hours. They justified this extreme violence as just a necessary tool to establish Spanish rule and spread the Christian faith. It's a stark, jarring contrast between their self-image as holy messengers and their brutal earthly reality. And that sense of entitlement, it escalated extremely fast.
Just listen to this letter from the conquistador Lope de Aguirre to King Philip of Spain. I demand of you, king, that you do justice. We make the cruelest war against you. When the Spanish crown eventually tried to send over loyal officials to govern these new colonies and rein in the conquistadors, men like Aguirre straight up rebelled. They believed they had bled for the New World. They felt they were entirely owed political independence and immense rewards, which put them on a direct collision course with the very king they'd originally set sail to serve.
Next up, Section 4, Dividing the World. Let's look at the geopolitics of empire. The sheer audacity of this next event is literally mind-boggling. It's 1494, and Spain and Portugal are on the verge of a massive war over these newly discovered lands. To prevent total chaos, Pope Alexander VI steps in, resulting in the Treaty of Tordesillas. They literally drew an imaginary line in the ocean, the line of demarcation. Everything west of that line, not already ruled by a Christian sovereign, went to Spain, and everything east went to Portugal. Two nations, with the Pope's blessing, attempted to slice the entire earth in half and just hand it out to each other. And this brilliantly illustrates the result of that treaty, a land grab of a scale we can barely comprehend today. Armed with superior steel weapons, horses, and the horribly devastating impact of imported diseases, Spain claimed incredibly vast territories. We are talking all the way from the modern-day United States, straight through Mexico and Central America, right down to the southern tip of South America. They toppled the mighty Aztec and Inca empires in just a matter of months, completely swapping out the native ruling classes for their own colonial administration. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the global impact, and the ultimate fallout of this conquest. So, how did Spain actually extract wealth from this massive amount of new territory? They set up something called the encomienda system. The Spanish crown essentially granted tracts of land to colonists, but the catch was, these grants included the indigenous people already living there. Under the convenient excuse that the Spanish were there to protect the natives and teach them the Catholic faith, these people were brutally exploited. They were used as a totally free manual labor force, pushed into backbreaking work in the fields, and sent deep into treacherous silver mines under horrifying conditions. The human cost of this era is almost impossible to wrap your head around. 90%. That is the estimated mortality rate of the indigenous American population in the 1500s and 1600s. Now, while forced labor and warfare obviously took a huge toll, the overwhelming majority were actually wiped out by epidemic diseases brought over from Europe. We're talking smallpox, measles, influenza. The native populations had zero biological immunity to these pathogens, leading to an absolute catastrophic demographic collapse. Operating right alongside that demographic collapse is this staggering number, 16,000. That's how many tons of silver were extracted from the Americas between 1550 and 1650. This wealth flowed out of places like Potosi, deep in the Andes Mountains, and completely flooded Europe. It actually created the first truly global trade network, with Spanish silver crossing the Pacific to purchase Chinese silk and porcelain. But make no mistake, this incredible surge of European wealth was built entirely on the back of immense human suffering. The fallout of this whole era really operates on dual tracks. On one track, you have the devastating population collapse of native laborers, which directly led European colonists to look elsewhere for a workforce. This catalyzed the horribly brutal transatlantic slave trade, where millions of Africans were enslaved and shipped to the Americas to work the sugar, cotton, and coffee plantations. But on the other track, you have the Columbian Exchange. This was an unprecedented, massive swapping of crops, animals, and cultures across the oceans. Everyday items like potatoes, tomatoes, and corn revolutionized diets over in Europe and Asia, while horses and cattle permanently transformed the Americas. The world became deeply and permanently interconnected. So, what does this all mean for us today? How is our modern world still shaped by the profound and often devastating legacies of these 15th century explorers? From the very languages spoken across Latin America today, to our modern geopolitical borders, global capitalism, and the cultural makeup of entire continents, the pursuit of gold, God, and glory by two small nations set off a chain reaction that is quite literally still rippling through our lives. What do you think is their most lasting legacy? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.